It is May, which is one of the most exciting months as a gardener because it's warm enough to sow pretty much anything you want, and this is really the moment where you want to be sowing the last things that you really intend on putting out into your garden. So as you can see, I've already got a couple plants growing here, a couple plants growing here, and I've got a few seedlings from April. But now that it's May, you can grow anything that's not cold sensitive, anything that really loves the heat, which are two different things, as well as any kind of brassicas that you forgot or that you want more of. So let me show you everything that I'm planting in May. Let's start off with brassicas and herbs. So what I've got here is basically spinach and lettuce, which grow pretty much the same way. And what spinach and lettuce do is basically you're going to want to put one or two of these in each seed starting container. Nothing special, plant them 1 or 2 centimeters down and you're good to go. Once they come up and they get a little bit bigger, you can separate them out and put them into the containers. Now the same applies for thyme and rosemary, but you will see them really often in the supermarkets for pretty good prices. So if you do want to save yourself a bunch of time, it's no problem to just go ahead and grab one from the supermarket. Because you're going to end up with a pretty decent plant already. Here I've got a thyme from the supermarket, which has been growing for about 2 weeks now, versus one from the supermarket that I've just put in. And as you can see, this one's much further along and much more developed. And if you start from seed, you're going to be waiting even longer for that. Now, I don't have a rosemary plant, so I am going to be starting my rosemary in a seedling container. Now, the important thing to know about rosemary is that you're going to want to give them a little bit more space than you might think they need. So instead of going for 3 per little container, I might be just going for 2, because as they grow, they're gonna like bush out really quickly, even when they're still quite small. And then that brings me to parsley, which really loves being sown very densely. So I'm gonna fill up a couple of containers and I'm gonna sprinkle them quite liberally. And yeah, at some point I'm gonna have like 3 containers of parsley, and those are just gonna be put into 1 container altogether. So let's talk quickly about what soil I'm using. This that I've got here is basically a combination of compost and perlite, which is one of my favorite seed starting mixes. But if you want to go just pure compost, that's also great. Just make sure you keep it wet. That's the most important thing when you're just starting off little seedlings. They need to have that moisture on them all the time. In fact, it might even be a good idea to just cover them with a piece of plastic or half of a water bottle or something like that, just to make sure that moisture stays locked in. Moving on now to the stuff that likes to be direct sown, we've got, of course, carrots and beetroot. Now, the reason why you want to direct sow these and not start them off in a much smaller container is that they basically grow with a taproot, which means that as that little plant grows, it sends one very long root down, and if you're transplanting it and moving it, you're probably going to disrupt it a little bit, and it just doesn't like that. So you can transplant it. It's probably better to just direct sow it. So you want to kind of get the spacing right the first time, or you're going to end up with something that looks like grass field, which is going to be a nightmare to thin out later, which is a mistake I made. So now I'm spacing them out properly. Now is also the perfect time to start your peppers, and I'm going to be using this one, which I grew last season and it didn't do well. I was not happy with the result, but my pepper order is still on the way, and I'm going to be growing like jalapenos, ghost peppers, Carolina Reapers, all kinds of peppers. That's my goal for this year, just see what happens. So definitely stay tuned, because that video is going to come out quite shortly, where I just show you all the different varieties that I'm going to be putting into the garden this year. And once again, I mean, peppers are pretty easy to sow. You just kind of plop them in 1 or 2 centimeters down into the dirt, make sure they're covered, make sure you keep them warm. That's the most important thing with peppers, and why you really don't want to start them earlier in the year unless you live in a really warm climate or have some kind of heat mat. They need that heat to be really warm to germinate well. And on that same vein, let's talk about cucumbers. Now, I've got a nice little special variety here from a friend, as well as some seeds that I used last year, which, you know, the gherkins that I got, basically these were like small pickling cucumbers, and I was really disappointed, but that's because I had no idea what I was doing with cucumbers. So starting them off, some people like to direct sow them, which is fine. I still think that I can transplant them no problem, but basically it's the maintenance phase which gets difficult, and you have to make sure that you harvest it properly. As soon as you see the cucumbers reach their right size, harvest them. it makes a huge difference. And that brings me to my rhubarb chard, which on the package it says that I should direct sow it. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, especially since it's called a beet leaf, which means that it probably also sends out a taproot. I'm not sure, I'm gonna have to look into that more, but it seems like chard is something that you're better off direct sowing. And what's epic about chard is that it is hyper productive. So I'm gonna get so much food from this plant. It's gonna be one of my main producers this summer for sure. And apparently the stalks taste like asparagus and the leaves taste like spinach. So those are two wonderful, lovely vegetables. All right, now we're getting to really interesting varieties. We've got corn, lemongrass, nasturtiums, and yes, I know you didn't see this one coming, peanuts. So let's start with corn. So something people might not know about corn is that corns need at least 2 plants together, kind of germinating each other, because it's not going to pollinate itself. It basically requires at least 2 to kind of stand next to each other. And what happens is at the top, you have these tassels, and as it kind of like sprays pollen down, it like captures those, and then that's how you end up with corn. I know, that was a lovely biology, anatomy, plant lesson. You can look it up if you want more details. But the point is, you need multiple corn plants, so I'm gonna make sure that I have at least 4 corn stalks growing really close to each other. So let's talk about lemongrass. Now, lemongrass is a grass, but you're gonna want to probably direct sow this. You can transplant it, but what's important to know about lemongrass is that the seeds actually do need to be in direct contact with sunlight, or they're not really gonna grow well. So just sow them lightly over a container. I'm probably gonna direct sow these, and it's a grass, so it will grow prolifically as long as you give it water and as long as your soil is pretty good. I mean, this is probably gonna be one of the easiest and again, one of the most productive things that I'm gonna have growing in the garden this season. Now let's talk about nasturtiums, because what's missing from my little balcony garden is of course flowers. Luckily, I have a couple of neighbors that are growing some incredible flowers, which really does help out, but I do want to give the pollinators and the good kind of insects just a little bit of an extra incentive to hang out around here and basically help out and make sure that this is a good biome. So nasturtiums are great, and I'm gonna be sowing these in little seed starting containers. So here we go, now we're moving on to peanuts, and as you can see on the package, you basically just wanna put them a couple centimeters underneath the surface, and that's how they're gonna grow. So that's really cool. This is gonna be really fun to pull out and basically see all those peanuts on the roots of the plant at the end of the season. So I'm actually really looking forward to this one. I'm a big fan of peanuts. So guys, please subscribe if you want to see that pepper video that should come out by the end of this month, as well as just regular updates on my garden. I mean, I've got a bunch of seeds from April which are growing well, which I will be transplanting into the garden probably in about 2 weeks. So that's going to be a really fun video. And just in general, you know, this is the part of the season where things start to get interesting. So please subscribe if you want to see more content, and catch you in the next one.